Hi, my name's Sonia and this is my channel, See It Then, See It Now. I'm really excited to share this one with you. It's by far my most challenging woodwork project to date and it's turned out absolutely amazing. Just before we jump into the video though, I would like to say thank you so much for all the lovely comments that I got on the last video, which is when I upcycled the bed. If you haven't seen that, then do go check that out, but after you've watched this, let's jump in. But don't go till you watch this one. What I need to do is make a template so that I can draw it out onto the wood to cut round. So what I thought I'd do is get a piece of paper the size of the headboard and start playing around with the mouldings just to get an idea of what will work, so that I can then draw and create a template that I can then use. So I'm just going to measure up and cut out some paper to the size of the headboard, and then I can start playing around with the moulds. Once I had my paper cut to size and the large centre mould in place, I started playing around with some plaster moulds that I had left over from when I made the feature wall. When I was making the moulds for this wall, I had issues with bubbles in the plaster, so I just kept making more and more until I had enough without bubbles. I did keep these bubbled ones. I do plan making a piece of artwork with them at some point. Anyway, after messing with them for some time, I eventually came up with a design for my headboard. Slight problem though, at this point I wasn't happy with it, but I wasn't sure why. Definitely part of this was worried that it wasn't going to look like it did in my head, but also something was not sitting right with me. So I spent a few days just going into the room, looking at the template, and then walking away knowing that I wasn't happy with it. And although making my own headboard was going to work out a lot cheaper than buying one that looked the way that the look I was going for, I had to buy wood and fabric and foam, so I didn't want to waste that money by getting it wrong. Something that I sometimes find very helpful is that if you take a picture of a project, it looks different on the picture to what it looks like in real life. And I find it sometimes very useful because it can sometimes show any faults or imperfections up more easily. They stand out more easily on a picture than they do when you're just looking at the whole project. As soon as I took a picture of this, I saw what the problem was straight away. The headboard sides were not going up straight with the bottom. They weren't at a right angle to the bottom. So I totally scrapped the template and I created another one, making sure that I set off at right angles from the bottom of the paper. So now that I was happy with my template, it was time to transfer it to the piece of wood ready for cutting. I started by cutting out the template just along the very outer edge. I needed 2 pieces of wood to make this headboard. I had a thinner piece that was going to be the back and a thicker piece that was going to be the front of the headboard. I positioned the template onto the wood, making sure that I had it straight across the bottom edge. I then did lots and lots of measuring just to make sure and doubly make sure and triply make sure that I had this in the right place, and I then drew around the template. The sun was shining, but the wind was playing games with me out here. I was having lots of fun with the wind. The outer edge of the headboard needed to be the exact same size on both pieces of wood, so I decided to screw the pieces of wood together in several places and then cut them at the same time. This way I could make sure that I would end up with them the exact same size and shape, and also it made sure that neither of them moved while I was cutting the wood. As the thinner piece was going to be the back of the headboard, I had laid this one on top of the thicker piece. I made the holes using a drill, making sure to go all the way through the thinner piece, but not all the way through the thicker piece. To help with this, I popped a piece of tape around the drill bit at the position where I needed to go down to, so I knew that once I got to the piece of tape I had to stop drilling down. That way it made sure that I didn't go all the way to what would be the front of the headboard. I had positioned the holes so they could be used again at the end of the project when I will need to re-screw these two pieces back together. They're only together at this point until I've cut the wood. At this point, the alarm bells were ringing again. Now that the template was drawn out on the board, I felt that there would not be enough fabric showing once it was all done and in place. So I went away, double checked my measurements and came back and decided to move the template up to make the headboard slightly taller. This of course meant that I had to move all those screws. Okay, so I had it all screwed together, the template was all drawn out ready, and this was where it became very real. No turning back now. We were doing this, it was time to cut out these pieces of wood. So I put my big girl pants on, I took a deep breath and I cut out the outer edge. Now I had my headboard cut to shape, I removed all the screws and put the thinner piece of wood to one side. I cut around the inside edge of the paper template. I positioned it onto the wood so that the outer edge of the paper was level with the outer edge of the wood, and I drew around the inner edge. Using a bit of masking tape helped to keep the paper still while I got it in position to draw around. I did some extra measuring just to make sure and double make sure and triple make sure that I had everything where it needed to be, and then I cut around the inner edge, and this was all just on the thicker piece of wood. So I've been mixing these moulds up, I've just got 2 left to do. I have tried all sorts to get a good finish on these and nothing works. So the last 2 I did, I literally just put them in and left them, and they've got the least amount of bubbles of all of them. But how you're supposed to get the bubbles out, I have no idea. The first set of resin I got seems to have done the best out of all of them, but I'm on my 3rd different kind of resin. I got this one because it's supposed to dry quick. Don't think it does particularly. It dries quicker than the other, but it's supposed to be 4 hours. It's definitely not 4 hours. And yeah, the whole thing, I just can't get rid of the bubbles. So, rant aside, if anyone knows how I can create these moulds without bubbles, then please do let me know. It is so frustrating. I followed the instructions exactly and mixed equal parts for the time that it stated on the bottle. This was slightly different depending on which one I was using. I mixed it using the stirrer that they supplied. I tried to mix slowly, making sure not to lift the stirrer out of the resin because it said that doing this would put air into the resin. Once it was poured, I tried all sorts. I tried running my heat gun across the surface. I could see the bubbles popping, but not all of them. I tried bringing them to the surface with a toothpick. A lot of the advice on Google seems to be for a surface pour. The heat gun seemed to work really well for the top surface, but this was going to be the back of my mould, and I was getting bubbles in the bottom of the mould, which of course was going to be the bit that was going to show. So any tips or advice on how I can get these bubbles out of these kind of moulds would be very welcome. And I think I just said rant over, but I think I just carried on ranting there. So I do apologise, but yeah, it's very frustrating. Okay, so I've got my basic shape now, and I'll be honest, it does take some imagination. But I need to decide what moulds I'm going to put around here. So obviously this one's going to go in the centre. And I'm just going to have to make sure that that is bob on in the centre once I've finished playing around with the moulds. Once I had the large mould positioned in the centre, I started playing around with the moulds again to create a design. I was really struggling with my back. I have a slip disc, and sometimes it's not pleasant, and I was really struggling with it, so I tried to carry this through to my craft room so that I could do it at desk height to save the strain on my back, and I knew it wasn't going to work. Sometimes you just know, and I went to carry it through, and I cut the wood on the door frame, and all the moulds fell off, and they were everywhere. They were all over the floor, they went down the stairs, they were just everywhere. So after gathering them all back up and getting the wood onto my desk, I once again played around deciding where to place them and coming up with a design. There's nothing like doing a job twice. Don't you just love it when you waste your time and then have to do it all again? Once I was happy with the design down this right hand side, I drew around each of the little moulds just to make a mark on the wood so I'd know where to glue them. If you guys have seen the video where I upcycle the set of drawers for the guest bedroom, you'll know that I spent 100 lifetimes trying to get the moulds level and equal at each side of the centre of the plinth. I had no idea how I was going to measure these moulds in a way so that they would match on the opposite side of that big mould. And then I had a real light bulb moment. I'm sure if I hadn't thought of this, I would still be measuring these out now. But here it comes, my moment of pure genius. I traced the pattern on that side of the large mould and then transferred the pattern to the other side. A round of applause please, Becky. I had all the marks all over the wood now ready for the moulds to be glued on, but before I did that I just decided just to soften the edge of the frame. I just felt like the edges looked a little bit too square, so I just softened them, just used a bit of sandpaper and just softened the edges down a little bit. I positioned the mould on the frame, I made a note of where the glue needed to be, and I stuck them in place with the little bit of E6000 I had left, and then I used Gorilla Glue. I did keep going back and checking that they were staying stuck and in place, especially where they were hanging over the edges of the frame. I also made sure to clean up any glue that squeezed out from the sides. The moulds that I'm gluing on here that are white, these ones I did try to minimise the bubbles. I tried mixing a bit of filler and white chalk paint and painting it on. It helped a little bit, but it wasn't brilliant. Okay, so now that we've got that side that you can't see of the headboard done, we're going to do this side now. So it's just more of the same, putting the glue on, sticking them down. Get some masking tape just in case we need to hold any in place. I'm going to use this last bit of glue up before I start on the new tube. But as I'm doing each of these, I'm just going to kind of get a feel for whether I've got them the same amount of overhang, but we should be somewhere near. I've marked, so from here up is off the wood, it's past the top of here, so I don't want the glue to go any further up than that. This mould is not been the best purchase. I will link in the description box, but it's not been the best purchase, and I ordered it a long time ago, so if it's still for sale I will link it, but yeah, this is not level, so I put it on I couldn't get it to level up on here and be completely straight, and I thought I'd cut my piece of wood wrong, but when I actually put it on a straight board, it is actually not like this. These are not the same height. That one goes up more than that one, or the other way around, so it isn't completely symmetrical. So I ordered it a long time ago, so I can't send it back, so I'm just going to work with what I've got and hope for the best. The other thing as well is it's really lumpy and bumpy here at the back. It's not straight, so some of this I'm going to put glue on, and the glue's not even going to be touching anything because it's beveled. So I'm just going to basically put it here, there and everywhere and hope we get enough. I feel like that's beveled in there, and any glue we put on that middle bit's not going to do anything. Anyway, let's just stick some glue on for now. Once I had plenty of glue on the back of this large mould, I positioned it on the wood, and then I clamped it all down and left it overnight to dry. Keep your fingers crossed for me that it doesn't move and that it just looks straight when it's done. So I'm just going to give the whole thing a coat of white paint, and then I can see if I need to fill in and what it's looking like. It's going to take a few coats of white paint, but I want it white. But I'm going to do the first coat and see if I need to, I'm probably going to need to put filler in here and there. So I don't really know, I'm just going to start. Where shall we start? Well, let's see how this is going to cover. Okay, you guys don't need to watch me paint this all over, probably about 3 times. So I'm going to stop recording, I'm going to carry on. Once I've got this first coat all over, I'm going to turn it over, I'm going to turn it each and every way until I've got the whole thing nice and white. Yeah, it's going to take a while. This has all had a coat of paint now. It's starting to come together a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is anywhere where, I'll just put the camera here so that hopefully you can see this. Anywhere where we've got any gaps, I'm going to get those filled in. After here. And then I not only need to do it from this side, but I need to do it from that side. Sideways, just find any gaps and get them filled in. So I'm just going to take a bit of filler. And push it into the holes. I used a brush to fill in any gaps with the filler, wiping off any excess with a damp cloth. Once the filler was dry, I gave the whole thing another coat of white paint. Once I was happy I had this nice and white, I went over with some silver gilding wax using a small paintbrush just to highlight all the moulds. I also popped some in places along the frame as well. I then gave it a coat of varnish. I first went over it with a coat of gloss varnish, but then I just wasn't liking the finish. I just wasn't liking the glossy look. So I went over the top of that with a coat of matte varnish, which I preferred. I thought that was much better. Now that I had the frame sorted, the next thing I needed to do was to attach the legs. I decided to use the legs from the old headboard. It did mean that I needed some fixings to be able to bolt these onto the back of the headboard. I bought these little fixings from Amazon. I'm calling them fixings, I'm not quite sure what they're called, but I will link them in the description. These needed to go on the inside of the headboard so that when you screw from the back of the headboard, it pulled tight through, so the bolt on the back would pull the fixing tight through the headboard and keep the two fastened together. After getting a bit of advice from the supervisor just to make sure that I was on the right track, I first drilled a small hole and then drilled a larger hole big enough for the fixing to fit through. I decided just to do the bottom one on each leg to start with. My thought process was that I may be able to adjust the hole slightly if needed once I know the leg slot in at the bottom. The fixings didn't really want to push in and they did need a little bit of a help with the hammer, so after getting this first one in, I decided just to drill the hole in the second one a little bit bigger, just to try and help get the fixing in a little bit easier. I then screwed the legs back on so that I could see if it was going to fit on the bed. It fit, it slotted in, absolutely amazing. Okay, I know, a bit too early to celebrate yet because I did still need to get those two other fixings in. Sorry, this is not the best camera angle, but I basically used this ruler to make sure that my legs were vertical, and I checked and triple checked, made sure that they were in the right place, and then I tried to make a mark where the hole needed to be. And because I was struggling, because the leg was so thick, to get my pencil through the hole to make the mark, I decided just to draw a line up each side of the leg and mark the back of the headboard just to show where the legs were going to sit. This turned out to be a really good thing because once I'd removed the legs I couldn't actually see where I'd placed the mark for the hole. So what I did was I placed the leg back in on the back of the headboard, just put it in place where it was going to sit, and then put the drill bit through the hole and drilled straight through that way. Then it was just a case of repeating what I did with the first holes, hammering in the fixings, screwing the legs back on, and then holding my breath while I checked to see if it was going to fit. I was totally amazed and astounded, and frankly quite proud of myself that it fit. I kind of expected the back of this to resemble a pincushion by the time I finished with several attempts, but no, I did it with just the 4 holes. Now to make the front look the part. I had drawn around the frame so that I could see where the padding needed to come to, and I cut out a piece of dacron to go over the padding. I placed the frame on top of the foam and I lined it all up and made sure it was level. I then drew around the edge of the frame onto the foam so that it gave me a cut line so I could see where the excess needed to be removed. You can get this cardboard like roll and that's used for doing this kind of thing, but I didn't want to buy a full roll because it was like £13 and you got a ridiculous amount of meterage which I might never ever use. And I spoke to my dad, who's an upholsterer, and he said that you don't have to use that, you could always use some pieces of card, and I'm always one for recycling where possible, so I've cut up a Amazon envelope and hopefully it's going to do the same job. So I've used a ruler and I've drawn a line. I didn't measure it, just as a bit of a guide for putting the fabric on. So my fabric needs to be this way up because that's the pattern, the flowers are going the right way. So I'm going to fetch it down like that, and it's because this is the bottom of my headboard, and I'm going to make sure that I've got enough fabric at each side. It's going to hang over at the ends, and I'm just going to use line it up with the line, and I'm going to get a piece of cardboard, and hopefully this will work. I'm going to line the piece of cardboard up with the edge of the piece of wood, like so, and then I'm going to drop it all and start again. Now that I've found my staple one, so let's try that one again. I'm going to start in the middle. I put these on the guillotine to make sure I've got a nice straight edge. So keep this cardboard level with the edge. And the idea is that I end up with a nice neat edge along this front. So all I need to do now is carry on doing the same all the way along. I continue stapling the fabric and card all the way along the bottom edge of the headboard. I used some spray adhesive and I stuck the foam in place. I had the foam so it just went over the line on all 3 sides. I laid the dacron over the foam and then I brought the fabric over the top, making sure that the dacron was sat nice and flat and neat and was sitting straight along that bottom edge. So in my head, I feel that I need this bit to be as flat as possible where the moulds are going to go, and that so long as I've got my staple past here, it's not going to show. So I'm going to use I'm going to put it as tight as possible. I was totally nervous about doing this bit. I just really wanted it to work, and I've never done anything like this before, so I wasn't sure if it was going to work. So before each staple, I spent a good while just making sure that it was all pulled straight and that I smoothed it out both towards the sides as well as just from top to bottom, and smoothing it out, and then being very careful and very thorough in making sure that it was all flat and smooth before I put each staple in. And each staple I made sure that I was past that line that I'd drawn on, so that every single staple would be behind the frame once the frame got screwed in place. When I got to these very end bits, I placed a fold in the fabric and I stapled down, making sure that I was just past that line that I'd made. Sorry about my head getting in the way a little bit. Now I had the fabric in place, I just needed to cut off the excess. I'm going to screw the 2 sections together now. I'll just give this turn round. So now this is the fun bit where I have to try and get them matched up and screwed back together. Moment of truth, had it worked? I started putting the screws back in. It was a little bit awkward lining up for the first screw, but once I had this one in, the others just went in quite easily. Once I had all the screws in, I wasn't happy with it. I felt like it needed to be tighter. So I added extra screws until the two pieces of wood sat nice and tight together. There we have it on its legs and ready to go. So let's see. All that I had left to do was to just tidy up this top edge. I just gave it 2 coats of the white chalk paint. I'm not sure if I should put something on the back of this headboard. Should I tidy it up? Does it matter that those screws are showing? Should I maybe pop a piece of fabric over the entire back of it just to cover it up and make it neater? It is going against the wall and no one's going to see it, but what are your thoughts? Should I do something with the back just to tidy it up a little bit more, or is it okay as it is? Let me know in the comments. So let's have a reminder and see it then. And let's see it now. I absolutely love how this turned out, but let me know what you think in the comments. Also remember to hit that like button. When I set out doing this headboard, I had a really clear picture of what I wanted, and I had a look round, and the price of them were just so expensive, and I just couldn't justify spending that much money on one. So I think I've done a really good job of creating my own version for a lot less money, but do let me know what you think in the comments. If you're not yet subscribed, then do please consider subscribing. It does help my channel to grow and it's totally free. I've got lots more coming on the guest bedroom. I've got bedside tables, bedside lamps, some decorative bits, some curtains. It is all starting to really come together now, so I can't wait for the final reveal. I just think it's going to look amazing, and I can't wait to share that with you as well. So if you're not subscribed, then please do get that subscribe button hit, and make sure you don't miss out. All that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.